So, continuing with the topic of emergence, which is the way that we see that nature is enough, it's the processes by which creativity works at all levels. How does that apply to the meaning that we require as humans? I mean, does meaning emerge?
That's critical. I think meaning does emerge, and I think it emerges when living systems emerge. I think that meaning and significance and goal-seeking behavior, all of that, is a property of living systems. And so if in the cosmic evolution process, before there were living systems, there was no meaning making, there was no meaning seeking, no goal-seeking behavior. And so my view is that prior to the emergence of living systems, it doesn't make any sense to say that the universe had any meaning at all. It was a meaningless domain. And that just hits me right smack in the chest because I'm encountered every day by the idea that a meaningless, absurd, pointless, senseless universe created meaning.
But you added some other things there.
And that,
senseless, pointless. What was the other? There was another.
Absurd.
Absurd. Okay, so these are all value judgments that humans add to the universe, and I would suggest that it's not only not useful to think that way, but it actually drives some people the other way around. Here's the way I would frame it, and I think we're coming from the same place. That is, prior to life, we have no meaning makers, and we have no meaning givers. So to say that it's either meaningful or meaningless is like saying what happened before the Big Bang. It's irrelevant. But once you have life, and then especially once you have conscious life and human conscious life, that we live in a world of symbolic language, so our symbols, I find that it would be, yes, you can say that looking back and saying before life it was meaningless, or you can simply say that once life, this is the way I say it, once self-reflexive life, once the human animal that can reflect on itself reflecting comes into being, you've got basically a infinitely meaningful universe. That is, there's no one way to interpret the universe. There's no one way to interpret life. There's no one way to interpret matter. There's no one way to interpret anything, the trajectory of evolution, or anything else. So the question then isn't, is there one handed down meaning that is the meaning? No. But to say that the universe is meaningless is also adding meaning. So that's, sure, you can say that. But I find it more useful, just from a pragmatic standpoint, to say the universe, once we have self-reflexive consciousness, the universe becomes infinitely meaningful. And the question then becomes sort of the collective task. How can we interpret reality? The reality of the past, the reality of the present, and given these patterns, the likely reality of the future, in ways that inspire the most people to have the strongest social coherence, the most profound personal wholeness, and that we collectively work together to ensure a healthy future. I find it just more useful to think about an infinitely meaningful universe because, again, I don't think of the universe as separate. The universe includes us. As Thomas Berry and Brian Swim often said, you don't understand stars if you don't understand what stars end up producing. It's kind of like you can't understand an apple tree if you don't realize that it produces apples. So this material universe actually produces, at least in this solar system and presumably elsewhere as well, self-reflexive intelligence. Mm-hmm. So that's, we're a necessary, not maybe a necessary, we are an inevitable fruit, or at least
whoops.
Yeah,
Whoops.
Yeah, exactly. We don't know enough to know whether it's inevitable or not. But we are a fruit of the universe, let's put it that way. Self-reflexive consciousness is a fruit of the universe. That's the only universe that we know, which is universes that produce that. And so it's just, I'm in 100% agreement that there is no handed down one final revelatory from on high meaning, but I find it more useful. People keep leaning in my direction if I talk about that. Let's not fight each other over which is the one true meaning, but let's say what are some inspiring interpretations that we can agree on so that we can move forward in a way that inspires all of us to be in action.
Well, I think it looks to me like semantic problem.
Well, it's a
I
semantic
don't
problem
think
because
so.
a lot of the nihilists and existentialists were so sort of stuck, in my opinion, in this idea that the universe is absurd and it's meaningless.
Steve, I'm with Stephen Weinberg on this. The universe. Would you agree that before there were living systems, and this is not a value judgment, really, would you agree that before there were living systems, there was no goal-seeking behavior? Or was the universe, are you Whiteheadian enough to think that the universe had it in the back of its mind that it was going to create this moment in history?
My most authentic response is, I don't give a damn.
Oh, okay, well then.
No, but there is.
If you don't give a damn, then why are we pursuing it?
No, okay.
But
it has consequences, and I'll just mention the consequence that you brought up.
I would say yes, I agree with you. I don't see evidence of goal-seeking behavior prior to life.
Okay, so then the wonder of wonders, the one that whacks me in the chest every day, is how that essentially goal-less
Okay, I can go with
universe
that. Right? Okay. Produces goal-seeking
significant, a new kind of causality.
Okay, well, I can stand in the awe of that. I can celebrate the awe of that.
Yeah, well, okay.
And I'm with you on that.
I celebrate it. I don't celebrate it in song. I celebrate it in shortness of breath.
Yes. Yeah. No, I find it stupefying.
Yeah.
I find it like
stupefying. Yeah.
Okay. The reason to me that this has consequences, and it was something that's been a concern of mine for 20 years, is that because Stephen Jay Gould, through his essays in Natural History magazine, then aggregated in books, and because he was an extraordinary writer, and because his personal philosophy, his metaphysics about evolution and the universe as a whole, made him gravitate to use the word contingent, which people then used as accident, including a glorious accident, okay? That what I read in your book here on page 117, again, this is Nature is Enough, was that you gave the 7 statements that Jack Hott had put in his book, Nature is Not Enough.
No, is nature enough?
Is nature enough? Point 5, the emergence of life and mind in evolution was accidental and unintended. Now, to me, anyone who has a binary between a theological view, a supernatural God intending and doing something, and this is completely missing the most inspiring way and the most evidentially correct way of being purely a naturalist. And I see how this has come about, but words make a difference. And in my view, we can see that the dynamics, as you say, of matter and the laws of how matter interact, it was not preordained, but it was not an accident that stars formed from gravity and that the hydrogen and helium in stars then merged when the star was big enough into complex atoms, and that those complex atoms would then be involved in planets around later generations of stars, and that some of those planets would have the capacity to have those complex atoms come together in ways in which you would have replication and genetic memory, and then the whole spiral of those that survive and continue to reproduce are those that are good at surviving and reproducing. And so for me, calling that an accident.
Well, Jack is the one that called it an accident.
No,
yeah.
But Stephen Jay Gould did
I
too,
know.
and contingent. And so back in Stephen Jay Gould's time, I remember talking to Edward O. Wilson and saying, could you please write something that would counteract this? That at least back in the old days of Julian Huxley versus Jacques Monod and George Gaylord Simpson, they were all equally well-respected public intellectuals reading the works, and people could see there are different metaphysical approaches you could take from
You take
this.
the same science, same
Right.
facts, and interpret it differently.
Right. And Stephen Jay Gould had become the voice of science. I even heard my sister, she got Natural History magazine. She just assumed everything was a cosmic accident. It was all meaningless. So you got to find your meaning in whatever little thing. She was a mythic. And anyone who uses this term, given the evidence we now have for what can be expected to emerge from matter in this universe.
That's a problem. That's a problem. In this, whatever it is, number 5 or something.
5, right.
I think the word accidental and the word unintended are the same. I think it's superfluous to say accidental. I think what he means by accidental is unintended.
I don't intend my heart to beat, but it's beating.
Yeah.
I didn't have anything to do with that. Nobody had anything to do with it. It's beating. And that's more important than this word intended, accident, whatever.
But we don't know. I mean, is it possible that we keep finding cooperation happening at larger and wider scale? And is it possible that, okay, you start having living planets that cooperate, and then universes bring forth new universes, and they somehow program those new universes to go through what, from our vantage point, looks accidental, but it's not accidental at all. We just have it's arrogant to say something's designed, and it's arrogant to say something's accidental. It's emergent.
Yes, emergent. We want to stick with that word.
Right. Well,
the creativity of emergence, and it's the evidence for it is so strong. And once we settle this part, I want you to speak a little on some important cultural emergence.
Yeah. Okay. Well, there are different ways to talk about emergence.
Okay, good. Let's
Saint
do it.
Augustine had a notion of emergence, where at the creation there were little germs, gemmules, that were built into matter that would mature at a certain point. And that's like a seed. Put a seed in the ground, and at a certain point it will flourish, and its properties will become evident. That was Augustine's view, that there was a story of cosmic evolution. Things changed, and new things happened when the seeds were ready to sprout. That's one way of talking about emergence. That's what I call in this book the inheritist view. That is the meaning, the properties, all the stuff is inherent in nature and then comes out.
Is that your view?
No.
Okay.
No, my view is sort of the strong emergentist view, which says that there are properties of matter, and when matter interacts with itself, there is the possibility of creating new properties. Take carbon, take oxygen. When those interact, you get carbon dioxide or ozone, which has properties that were neither in the carbon nor in the oxygen.
Right.
Hydrogen, oxygen, water, and once you have a water molecule, actually there is no buoyancy, surface tension in a water molecule. It takes a certain mass, it takes a community in order for that property. So the interrelationship of matter creates the conditions for new properties to actually appear for the first time in the universe.
Right.
Not to jump out of a seed that St. Augustine put in there, but for the first time, absolute novelty. Okay.
Right.
For that, and then once those properties are there, and you get more interaction, properties create the conditions for the possibility of new properties, and so on. And so you get from non-living systems to living systems, and the organization begins to diversify until you have the United Nations or something really complex. Like
this is one of the places.
Local Boy Scouts tribe or something.
Yes.
This is one of the places where we both would qualify as sort of the way you just described it on the strong emergence position as well. And it's probably one of the main places, or certainly one of the places, where many of the people in the lineage of Thomas Berry, as we are, but many speak about, everything in the universe was there at the Big Bang, and I don't find that way of speaking.
No.
It's almost, that sounds to me more like sort of this inherited.
Right. That's
Yes.
Whitehead.
Right. Oh, that's Whitehead. Okay. Okay.
And I find this sense of emergence, greater complexity and emergence over time It fits the facts.
True novelty.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
True
Genuine.
True
knowledge.
Genuine
novelty.
So meaningfulness
Yes.
is genuinely new.
Yes.
It's real. I
Right.
mean, of course, that's
Right.
the other side of the argument would say that, like Dan Dennett, for example, has argued that this intentionality that we think is so real is not real. Ultimately, it's an illusion. We can take the intentional stance because it's pragmatically useful to treat things as if they have intentionality and goal-directedness and so on, but really, it's an illusion. The strong emergentist wants to say that no, intentionality, this new causal dynamic, the means to end causation. I did things in order to, or I did this so that, or your heart beats so that the body will be nourished and so on. That's real causality. Now, Dennett wants to say that that's shorthand talk for molecules doing what molecules do, and that there is no new kind of causality that comes into the universe with living systems. The strong emergentist view, and this is the view Terry Deacon takes, and the view that I take, and a few others, is that there is and John Haught, by the way, doesn't. He doesn't allow that there's a new kind of causality that enters the universe. But the strong emergentist view says that teleology is a genuinely new property of nature, and it's a property of living systems, and it didn't exist before. That's why I say prior to living systems, the universe was senseless and absurd and meaningless because there was no.
Yeah, but those are all value judgments.
No, I agree with
They're not
Roy.
value judgment. That's not a value judgment.
No.
It's a value judgment to look back and
To
say,
say
okay,
something
now
is
all of a sudden
absurd
it is
in the way that normal English language is used.
Mm-hmm.
Absurd is a value judgment.
No, it's not.
And,
No,
you
no.
can claim
Oh,
it's not.
no.
And if I say absurd to
No.
100 people, 98 of them are going to say, yes, it's a value
Yeah,
judgment.
but that
agree with
doesn't
Michael.
put 98 out of 100 doesn't make
So
it
yeah, the
right.
fact that a few academic and philosophers can try to argue that it's not, it's crazy.
No.
Pointless
Absurd-
is a value judgment. Absurd is a value judgment.
goal.
Life emerges out of a pointless universe. So
Yeah.
you're stupefied. I'm stupefied by that. But I find that language to be insanely goofy to use.
Right, I agree.
It's just goofy.
Why?
It's just not
if
useful.
if there's no goal-directed behavior, then it's absurd because absurd just simply means pointless.
No.
There's no point to doing this.
But we don't know enough. We don't know if if previous universes brought forth this and it was totally pointful.
Right.
We don't know. It's arrogant to say that it was either designed, we know that, or it's utterly pointless. Both of those, we don't have the evidence to say that.
Well, no, of
It's
course,
emergent. It emerges out, and we don't know whether
we find it in living systems. We don't find it in rocks.
that's
and ice.
true.
Right.
So what makes us
Right.
think?
No,
is
but-
there any ground at all to believe that it's inherent in the universe?
No. If we are strong emergentists, we need to not only value but take excitement and inspiration from the fact that it's ridiculous to ask before mammals and dinosaurs evolved whether love was in the universe. Okay, I'm talking about like maternal love. kind
Now,
of
why
thing.
is it ridiculous to ask that? I would say there wasn't.
Oh, right.
What's the evidence for it?
No, but it's like anybody who asks about what was time like or space like before the Big Bang, it's a question that is not even, why should I waste my time even thinking about
Well,
it?
no, you shouldn't waste your time thinking about it because there is no answer to it because
But
in
you
fact,
can't label it.
Time and space are created by the Big Bang.
Exactly.
And so
And
there-
meaning-
it
and
didn't
mean-
mean a thing before.
Right,
Okay.
and meaning is created when you have life, and so to start arguing about and using words like meaningless or absurd
Pointless,
for
absurd,
any
yeah.
pointless before life is exactly as ridiculous as arguing and trying to demand discussion about.
If it's
Tell
new,
me about time
if it's
before
new,
the Big
if
Bang.
it's new, if it's genuinely novel, this goal-directed behavior,
Mm-hmm.
meaningfulness,
Mm-hmm.
purposeful, pointfulness.
Mm-hmm.
If it's genuinely new, and we know on our planet it happened about 3.8 billion years ago,
Mm-hmm.
genuinely new, then 3 weeks before that, there wasn't any of that goal-seeking.
Right, but you
purposeful
cannot
behavior.
use absurd and pointless, that's assuming.
Let's put it this way:
Well, there were no point there.
there's no evidence in the history of humanity that any culture can survive thinking that the universe is pointless.
I don't disagree with that at all. Of course, I agree with it. I agree with it. But that doesn't mean it's true that it was meaningful.
I'm
Yeah,
saying
that's
it's
saying
infinitely meaningful.
Yeah.
That's
Yes.
a way to get around it by speaking
Yes.
of that. Now that life has achieved this degree of self-reflexivity, that from this vantage point looking back, we live in an infinitely meaningful universe. So let's get off the question of whether it's
but
pointless.
it's subjectively infinitely meaningful.
That's like the apple saying that the tree was pointless until me.
No, no, it's not like saying that.
No.
Not at all like saying that.
Right.
No, it's like the tree has a point, and it's me.
Yeah, I agree with both of you, and I think we're at an impasse.
Well, it's one of the. You can see why it is that I don't care about this question, because
Yes.
a lot of energy and passion and whatever can go into it, and ultimately it is utterly pointless. This kind of
Amen.
argument,
Amen.
because what really matters is how the fuck are we going to ensure a healthy future?
No, except that, if my way of formulating is correct, or
Well, it's valid,
okay,
but I'm saying it
but
may be valid, but not
given that
inspiring.
formulation, doesn't it just knock you down every day to realize that significance and meaning and purpose and pointfulness and intentionality and value, that all these things came out of
I don't think about it.
No,
because
I don't
I'm
a
just
universe
stupefied.
that didn't have any of that. So meaning comes out of absurdity. That's like saying
No, I get that it's.
life comes out of death.
I get that
I mean,
you.
that's like
I get
saying
that. I get that.
that's
That
like
way
the
of-
resurrection.
That's
I mean,
really important to you, Loyal.
I
And
get
that's
it,
great.
and I get it. And there's a
And
lot of others like
Yeah.
you, but there's for every one like you, there's 10 others. I'm suggesting there's 90% of the American population, just stick with America, that find that way of languaging it less inspiring than the way I'm languaging it.
Right.
And yet we both agree on the facts, but our ways of languaging it are different. And I'm a pragmatist in that the only thing I want to do is try to reach the most number of religious and secular people I can to inspire them from an evidential standpoint to work together to ensure a healthy future.
Okay.
Like that's the
Okay.
bottom line.
Okay, and there's one other place where the language used is a problem, and that's that Michael and I tremendously respect and embrace and consider part of our tribe many religious people inspired by Brian Swim and Thomas Berry, for whom ultimately underlying everything is not only God, but God is love. That love was a value that preceded even the Big Bang, okay?
Mhm.
They have a deep metaphysics there that doesn't get in the way at all.
Or some of the Eastern people consciousness.
Right. That doesn't get in the way at all of the outcome where we come to, and that is a deep reverence for nature that has the ability
And
to
evidence.
and evidence
yeah.
to inspire people into
Sure.
self-sacrifice for the future. So to introduce anything for pre-life that would use words like absurd and meaningless directly confronts the people who say God preceded it,
Or
God is
consciousness
love,
or love or
consciousness.
whatever.
Okay,
Yeah.
and we don't need to go there. And that's
No, you don't need to go
Yes.
there. I can remember, gosh, in the 60s or 70s, whenever the word recycling was invented, I can remember thinking, I don't care why people recycle. Right? Okay.
Yes.
So let's meet on the near end of
And
the
the
near
near
side,
side.
near
end of
side.
metaphysics.
But
when we
we're
talk
very
about recycling.
attentive to language.
Right.
But look,
The language police. We will be
there are
language
lots of
police.
Stephen Weinbergs in the world. Lots
Okay.
of people that take that view that it's just all nonsense, and I want to address some of those people and agree with them, agree with Stephen Weinberg.
But
that
even if that was true prior to 3.8 billion years ago, for the last as the entire book that Robert Wright wrote, Non-Zero, the first paragraph, to my mind, just sort of mocks Stephen Weinberg's position on that. He says, okay, that may be true for physics. When you get to life, it seems to have a point, and then he goes on from there.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
So we agree there.
So we agree there. And what I'm saying is that somehow
Yeah, and it is super
Physics,
fun. I get it.
physics made
Yes,
biology.
exactly.
And that's,
Yes,
That's-
exactly.
yeah.
I'm with
Right.
you. And I'm, yes.
Right, okay, hallelujah.
yeah, what I refuse to do is once admit that there are biological systems, I refuse to use that as a
I get that.
template for understanding
That's
the whole
fine.
universe.
That's fine.
I
That's great.
agree,
Okay.
That's fine.
totally with you there,
Okay.
Doyle,
So
totally
then-
with you.
So then you aren't gonna charge me like you did earlier with not getting it,
Oh, no.
right? Okay.
No, actually, yeah, I meant to clarify that because I think you get it completely. It's just that you don't. So I sometimes think that you may not get human psychology in terms of how to move a sacred naturalism perspective forward in the most.
Oh, okay. Well, that I leave to you.
Yay. Yeah, we each have our own.
Yeah, that I leave to, I'm no good at that.
We each have our, I'm no good at philosophy, thank God you exist, you know? All right, we all have our role to play, 3 musketeers here.
All for one and one for all.
Yeah, all right, let's go to another topic. Oh yeah, this one, choose whatever you want, but as I've given examples of the novelty, the emergence of complex atoms from simple atoms in the core of stars ancestral to our own sun, as I've given an example of the expected emergence that we can see of planets coming out of the gases inherent from the Big Bang, and then the complex atoms that came from previous generations of stars. As we can see that however you get life, boy, you're going to get diversity and complexity coming out of that. All of these kinds of things. Give us an example that fascinates you of a cultural emergence that can help us understand why those in the new atheist camp who want to just get rid of religion because the cosmology is ridiculous of the existing religions, why you say that you don't understand the adaptive value of religion in the cultural evolution of our species into larger and larger and larger cooperative groups.
I think I would, rather than choose an example of a cultural emergent
Okay.
that would stand for all of this, I would suggest that culture itself is emergent.
Okay, go for it.
That is, progressive, changeable culture is something that emerged, in my view, about 40 or 50,000 years ago, when humans quit living in small, intimate hunting-gathering bands, and all of a sudden were able to live in larger, of course, living hundreds and hundreds of generations on that model. This is the primate model, and this is what our instincts train us to do: live like chimpanzees. And all of a sudden, we were able to live in larger groups that were harmonious and sustainable. How did we get from that small band, that familial band, to a tribe? How did that happen?
Right.
Because tribes, of course, can be unstable and they're fragile and they can break down. How is it that they remain stable? And here I would suggest that this great leap forward from the hunting, gathering, small, intimate campsite group to a village, to a larger social reality, that happened because I'm taking the short view here, the short version. That happened because people were able to articulate a story that individuals would internalize, and when they did that, they found justification for following new rules of behavior that would prevent them from infighting, and so they would be able to see their brothers and sisters in those who weren't brothers and sisters, and so you get this larger group that's coherent and doesn't fall apart because of the story. It's the story that holds them together. And basically, it's a story that gives us a version of reality that is has how things are, an explanation of how the world works, and an explanation of what values are to be followed. those are merged together. That's what I call a mythos. And it's a mythos that enables human beings to live in larger social organizations. That's an emergent thing. It probably didn't happen once and for all. It probably happened by fits and starts and failures and so on. And I've got a scenario about that in one of my books, a sort of speculative story about how all that happened. But that's an emergent thing, culture is. And a story, religion, is what makes that possible. And so if you got rid of myth or religion or story, you would undermine the conditions for the existence of a larger social order.
Have you read Era Noriezen's book, Big Gods?
No.
It's the best book. It's widely considered to be the best book in the field now of evolutionary religious studies, because he really synthesizes several what had been competing schools within that movement. The subtitle, it's called Big Gods: How Religion Transformed Cooperation and Conflict. And it's brilliantly written. I highly recommend it. I read it only about maybe 6 months ago. It's not
When did that come out?
about 8 months ago.
Oh.
But I see what you're talking about I see as the emergence of what I'm calling religion 1.0, and I think that is your discussion of the Great Leap Forward. I find that not only most plausible but pretty damn inspiring. I see religion 2.0 as the thing he's talking about, because what Noriezen's what that whole book is about is how religion evolved from hunter-gatherer tribal religion to these big religions that now with
that's moving from a chiefdom to a state.
Exactly. And in fact, I'll find my copy. It's all marked up, so if you like looking at marked up copies, then just get it back to me after you're done. But
I'd like to just interject here that there's a foundation underneath this in terms of emergence, and that is just as we could expect in ancestral stars complex atoms to emerge, we could expect on this planet where humans emerged and got to the point of using symbolic language, that it was inevitable that for functional adaptive reasons they would have to aggregate in larger groups, and for a number of reasons. One, the larger your group, the larger the animal you could take down, that you can't, in just a little family level, you can't take down a mammoth or a mastodon or a herd of bison. That in order to protect your group from raiders coming in, you have to get big enough to be able to protect yourself. And if you yourself screw up your valley, your ecosystem, that's your tribal bounds, such that you've overhunted or something, you're going to need to raid outside, and you're going to need to be able to overpower others. So there's just as much a sense about, not that it's teleological in the plan, but once you got symbolic language going, there were some functional advantages to being part of larger groups. And if you stayed in a smaller group, you probably have to retreat to the Kalahari Desert where nobody else wanted to live.
Right. But there had to be something to hold that group together while it's not in the hunt for the mastodon. I mean, once they get back to the campsite, if they start stabbing each other.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, so you have to have a new kind of
totally.
ethos, more complicated rules of behavior than the sort of instinctual gut feeling behavior.
Right. Now, going back to something you mentioned, I also want you to talk about foundation. We use that word religion, and we call ourselves religious naturalists. And you have a great line in here. You say, if you tell me you're an atheist, I'm happy to tell you I'm an atheist. But given the connotations of that word, I prefer religious naturalist, and I like to say, yes, I'm an atheist, but I'm no less religious and view the sacred in no less a primary foundational way than anybody else who's traditionally religious. So talk to us about that word religion.
Well, for me, religion is a story that brings together, metaphorically, brings together ideas about how things are and which things matter. You know that whole scheme. I think what I would like to say about, I think I should have said more about spiritual growth. The spiritual and religious to me mean the same thing. You often hear people say, well, I'm spiritual, but I'm not religious. I think they mean basically the same thing. And I wish I had said more about spiritual growth than I did. But the literature on spiritual development or spiritual growth, faith development, all that stuff, the literature is vast, and I didn't want to wade in and, in one paragraph.
Right,
But
but recognize that those of us who are non-theists view the word spiritual the way it's usually used as the assumption that there's something magical, something that nature isn't enough, that science is not enough.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, what I would say now is that, and I think this is, for me, this has been important, to find a way to talk about growth in one's spiritual life. And to me, because that tells you what religion expects of you, right? Religion, in all of its forms that I know about, places expectations on people. And I'm wondering, what is it really that all these religious traditions expect of me? And I think I would put it in these terms. This is an experiment. I haven't written about this before. It seems to me there are three things that a religious tradition expects of us. One is to expand the range of your knowledge, to know more. Another one is to deepen the level of your understanding of what you know, right? Knowing something is one thing. Understanding it is another thing, because there you get a deeper, more broadly connected causal relationship with others. So you expand, broaden the range of your knowing, deepen the level of your understanding, and expand the scope of your affection. If you can do those things, if you are learning more, understanding it better, and those things coming into your life in such a way that enables you to enlarge the scope of your affection so that you can love not only yourself but others and other tribes and other species and so on. If you get that circle of moral relevance larger and larger and larger, then the religious tradition, whatever tradition you're in, can't expect any more of you than that. It seems to me that that's what makes us more human than we are.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly agree with that. I mean, I sometimes spoke about it in terms of being self-centered and then ethnocentric, and then
Right. Nationalistic and humanistic.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And ultimately, I mean, I just in my own life, I mean, I have compassion for people for whom my grandparents or great-grandparents hated or feared. My in-group has expanded to include even other other species, and not just.
And in part, that is a function of what you have learned, of the expansion of knowledge and deepening of understanding. So those things work together, and of course, as the scope of your affection broadens, that motivates you to learn more about this or that or the other thing, or to understand more. So knowing, understanding, and loving are these things that play on each other to heighten motivation, to help us set goals, to move us forward, to keep us alive and growing.
What both of you have been talking about now is kind of I would say, a spatial understanding of expanding that kind of a care and concern and compassion. The problem we're in right now with respect in particularly to climate change is that with respect to expanding our concern for time, we have to begin with expanding our relevance of time, and we certainly cannot be expecting a supernatural end time, or we're cut off from having an opportunity to expand our concern for time. We're starting with people like the great climatologist Jim Hansen saying storms of my grandchildren, and everybody's feeling that. I hear boomers all the time and older than boomers, boy, this thing about grandchildren. When it comes down to the specifics of what their region is going to be experiencing in the lifetime of their grandchildren, our biological instincts, our gut intuitions are right there. So we are living in a culture very different from, the sort of Native American sense of 7 generations that was a tradition of thinking beyond the biological gut instinct into broadening a sense of time. And we need to now, to have this epic of evolution, my understanding of paleoecology, help us also broaden beyond, starting with the biological. Oh my God, my grandchildren are going to be living in a time where they're going to lose all these gorgeous trees that we have here.
And they may starve due to famine.
Yeah, and if those of them stay in Southern California, they're going to die of thirst and not be able to get out of there in time, So the need to expand our sense also in time is equal to expanding our sense of tribe to include other peoples around the globe and also other species. One of the things I loved about your book is you introduced me to a phrase about why is it that just having an intellectual affinity with, of course, nature is enough, emergentism, this intellectual, that's how things are. But the need to also have what you say, to take that understanding to heart, to take it to heart, why that's important for religious naturalism, to have that emotion side. So could you talk about what do you mean by take religious naturalism or this nature is enough to heart, and what does that effectively do for us in terms of how we act in the world?
Oh, no. Well, I think there are a lot of ways to approach that, actually. I sometimes think in terms of agendas and computers. If you have, if you take Christianity to heart, that means that you delete your own agenda and you download God's agenda. I think that's what St. Paul was after when he said, no, it's not the old Adam, it's the new Adam. It's not me, but Christ in me. That means that the self-serving agenda has been thrown out.
Or subsumed or submitted to this larger.
Ideally.
It's not there anymore. The old Adam is gone. And now this being is a God serving, so I do God's will. Not my will, but God's will. So that's one way of saying something is being taken to heart. It becomes the message or the meme or whatever, the mythos becomes the algorithm that organizes your whole life.
Because you have a new identity.
Yeah,
right.
It's a new, and of course this is familiar stuff. This isn't anything new. This has happened forever, and it's what people mean by washing their sins away, by transformation of the spirit and stuff. It's where you let go of that agenda and take on a new agenda. That's taking it to heart, and that then will motivate you to do all kinds of different things. And it'll change the way you perceive people. It'll change the way you justify your own actions. It'll change everything when you take something, when you take a new mythos to heart. This is the religious part of religious naturalism. Okay. The naturalism part is shared by even Steve Weinberg, okay? But the religious part is that one takes nature to heart. And to do that, one has, and this is probably leads to the state in which a person has an I-thou relationship with nature. You take nature to heart, and by doing so, you see nature as something that needs to be served. That its needs, and here I mean life, its needs of an ecosystem, for example, become your needs. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like that way that you just articulated it. Because I'm always asking what do religious symbols personify, if anything. consciously or unconsciously. And for me, I choose to have all the major religious symbols of my Christian upbringing personify something. So for me, Christ is a personification of integrity. And by integrity, I mean the practices, the exercises, the thinking and acting that lead me to live in right relationship to reality. So if I think there's any path to right relationship to God, that is right relationship to reality, other than the path of integrity, then I'm kidding myself. So for me, integrity is this personification. So I love the way you just talked about it in terms of sort of the agenda, the old Adam, the old me is me simply pursuing my, my fascinations, my addictive nature, wanting as much pussy as I can get, wanting as many spiritual experiences and mystical experiences, drug induced or however induced as I can get. And to say that Christ is Lord, that integrity is now become my agenda, is to say that living in right relationship to reality is more important to me now.
Well, and then that's appropriate to use the Christ figure in that way, because it's basically sacrificial. When you delete your own agenda, that's a huge sacrifice. And you download some other agenda. And that's, of course, exactly what you get in the image of Jesus on the cross. You get this person who says, not my will, but thine, right? Okay. The person sacrifices his or her life because of some greater good. That's always hard to do. And we need to be motivated to do that by these stories that we.
Well, and that's why the main mythic reinterpretation that I'm trying to offer within the Christian realm specifically is reinterpreting the whole notion of the return of the Lord or the second coming of Christ or whatever. That isn't the unnatural return of a supernatural superhero, but it is the undeniable awareness that God, that the sacred, there's nothing more sacred or holy than what's right here.
Right.
And that to be Christian, to be a Christian, to be the return of the Lord is to simply be saviors of the future. And so I'm hoping that the Christian church can take on, like its mission, being the second coming rather than waiting around for it like some supernatural
event. No, I
event.
think the whole question about afterlife is interesting here, because very often, of course I grew up this way, very often people think of salvation as being, having a life after death, right? Not having to die. But I've always thought, not always, but at some point I started to think that a Christian really does not care about the afterlife. A Christian does not even think about the afterlife. Because to think about the afterlife is to think in terms of my own agenda. And if I'm thinking about my own agenda, I'm not Christ-like. And if I'm not Christ-like, I'm not saved. So it seems to me that the life after death, or going to heaven, or whatever it is a pointless concern for a true Christian. And if you're looking for because a true Christian will sacrifice that agenda. And if you're looking for a really good symptom of amenthia as you travel around the country, try to gauge the level or the extent to which people are willing to sacrifice. Because if you have taken a mythos to heart, sacrifice is part of the deal. I mean, it's right there. It's in there. I mean, that's what you're doing.
Exactly.
Others would call it sacrifice, but for you, it's a compelling joy.
Then that's it. And if you find that people around the country, and this is what I find, and I've found it increasingly in my students over the years, if you find people that are unwilling to sacrifice for some greater good, that's a sign of dignity.
I agree.
They haven't taken anything important to heart.
Right. And I go even further in the sense of I sometimes purposely try to provoke by saying something in a sort of slap way, but that the sense that any so-called faith that doesn't include trusting that whatever happens on the other side of death is just fine isn't faith at all. It's not, fear of a hellish after death scenario or hope of a blissful after death scenario, or just that fear or hope, not trust.
They're not they have no point at all in in discourse of a true Christian. And look, I used to ask my students this. It used to freak them out, really. And it'll freak out you. You try it when you're out there.
Okay.
What is it? What does it mean to be a Christian? It means to be Christ-like, right? I think so. That's what I used to hear.
Yeah.
Okay, so what is Christ-like? Well, to be Christ-like is to do God's will. Okay, so a Christian is an instrument for God's will, not an instrument for one's own agenda. Okay, so to be a Christian means, or a Jew, or a Muslim, means to delete your own agenda, your own self-interest, and to download God's agenda, doing God's will.
But most conservative Christians would say that comes from the Bible. That's where you learn God's will.
Right.
And I'd say it comes from evidence.
Okay, but as soon as you start thinking, okay, what's going to happen to me after I die? Your agenda has crept back into the scene.
Yeah.
Okay,
Right?
okay. You guys are talking Christianity. I'm going to go as a religious naturalist and talk about, to my ear, it sounds like a should. It sounds like the purpose of religious education is to get into the young, where you have them supervene their biological instincts or their larger cultural instincts, and they delete something in order to put in this self-sacrifice. My sense is I prefer to go with the sense of identity, to re-identify what self is. I've always felt for a long time that this should, however we do this, however we don't fear death, the basic thing needed is an expansion of my sense of self. I mean, as I get older, I have a far more expanded sense of self. I feel myself being more like a wave in the river, grateful for the short time that I have, wanting to contribute back to the river. And as I age, I want to have that sense that I'm not just this wave. As I start to fall apart, I'm going to feel like the river. And I'm not going to have this little self that I should this or should that. I'm going to be just like, I'm out of here. It's time for me to stop using food and resources for my own self here, because my expanded self is this whole immense journey of life, and all of the children, as Thomas Berry would say, to the children, the human children, the fish children, the insect children, for all the children to come. That is who I am.
I have this image of getting to the point in life where you look in the mirror and you say, really, all I'm good for now is nutrition for my decomposers.
Exactly.
So I can help in that way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Got